Alrighty, and yesterday we took a look at what is on screen now. We were talking about basically the integration points for UNOE scenarios. Okay, we're still looking at that, so that was completely covered. We did some testing with planning for the UNOE scenarios as well in TM, in the transportation cockpit. We learned a bit about the planning profile and how that was important to be able to see the freight units. We had an issue with the user I was using and we couldn't see anything. Today I changed users and it was working fine so far. So we'll have a better look at that. We understood that we are not really explaining or teaching you guys how to raise the shopping cart for freight. We're just telling you that now the shopping cart for freight is raised separately from the one for goods. And we also did a bit of the editing also in the portion for procurement freight. So we're looking at this section here. And we learned how to assign carriers and freight orders to the freight POs, to the freight orders, and edit the routes, dates, and charges of those freight orders. So today we'll have time to go through this section here, as well as one more time we'll do some of the managing of freight orders, and then we'll end up with the submission of events so we can see how that looks like in TM. But before that, I want to focus on this section here, because we've been talking about it a lot, but we haven't showed you what we expect you to be done in ECC. Now, of course, this shouldn't be performed by the roles of TS01, 02, 07, or 08, because those are roles for TM. But whoever is performing this action now in ECC, which is usually the inbound coordinator, would have to perform the packing. Okay, we're looking at the UNOE scenario, so we're going to be performing packing for an inbound delivery document. I'm going to look for the ECC connection I have here, and I already have it ready. I hope that it's large enough, that the screen is big enough for you guys to see. If not, I think the actions, at least that I'm going to be performing, will be clear enough in this screen. So basically what I have here right now is the actual PO. So I'm looking at a PO number. Okay, this is still the training environment. And below it in the confirmations tab, I see that we have the inbound delivery number here that was generated from this PO. So you guys, if you double click on the inbound delivery number, which I'm sure you're familiar with already, you basically go to the inbound delivery document and you're able to navigate through a series of tabs. You see the last one here to the right, it's the Rtm Status Tab, and we discussed this yesterday, but I didn't show you how to take a look at the tab and see if the inbound delivery document has actually generated DTRs and freight units. We saw that from the TM side. We logged into TM and we searched for DTRs and freight units using the inbound delivery document or PO. This time we're going to do it the other way around. Using the inbound delivery document in ECC, we're going to search for the DTRs and freight units. So basically you go to the tab for TM status, select your inbound delivery there in the header status section, click on document flow, and this will take you to the screen where you will be able to see if you have already the DTRs and freight units. So you understand if the actions you performed on raising your shopping carts, approving your POs, and then eventually getting your inbound delivery document have actually generated documents in TM, right? DTRs and freight units. In this case, you see you have the DTRs and the freight units, and we don't have any freight orders. And none of them are here, which is good news because that means that no one has planned anything yet for this freight unit, so it's blank. This is the way it should look for you guys after go live. If everything has been done properly, once your PO is approved, the inbound will generate automatically, okay, instantly, the DTRs and freight units. If they're not there, that means we have a problem. So basically, this is it. I know David was explaining how to solve the issue with the wrong Incoterm location in the inbound. So that is one way of fixing an error so that you can get your DTRs and freight units here on screen. But basically, this tab will display this, and here's how you know that everything was done properly. If there are no freight orders, that means that this is probably an XWorks scenario, because if it were a DAP scenario or an FCA Incoterm scenario, you would have at least either one freight order if it was an FCA, or all of them if this was a DAP scenario. There's a way to see this as well. For example, if I go back and we see here at header level, I'm going to click on the hat icon here. under the inbound delivery document, if I click on the hat, you see a set of tabs here. And if I'm not mistaken, it's under the, let's see if it's partner stock placement. So if you navigate through these tabs, you'll see under shipment, there it is. We have the Incoterm that was added to the shopping cart, right? So we have the Xworks and the location is Seoul factory. So we know that this type of Incoterm in the inbound delivery shouldn't be automatically generating any freight orders. So it works fine. If this were FCA, we would have at least one or two. If it were DAP, we would have them all planned already automatically. And when you go back to the screen I was showing you before, here under document flow, you would have all the freight orders also here below. Alrighty, so what we can do is, since we're going to be planning for this one, once we start planning and we get the freight orders, I'm going to come back into ECC and I'm going to take a look at the same tab and we'll realize that we have now the freight orders planned there as well. One thing that has not been done here is the packing. Okay, and I see that because the packing view button here is sort of grayed out. I can't access it. Okay, the packing hasn't been performed for this inbound delivery document, which is good because that's what I want to show you, how it's done. Now, I do hope that it works in the training environment. I know the packing will allow me to go and I'll be able to save it, but maybe it's not reflected. Hopefully it does work fine. So I'm going to go back all the way back to my initial screen here where we had our inbound and basically double click on the inbound. Again, I'm in the PO screen and I'm going to double click on the inbound that was generated. And once it's there, I can click on the packing icon. Now, I know this may not be your job, but it's still interesting to see how this works in ECC and how it impacts TM, basically because it's a required action now. We go to the pack material, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, but nonetheless, here's where we would be performing the packaging for the material that is here below. Okay, but basically I don't think I'm in edit mode right now. See? Okay. So it won't let me do the packing from this one directly. Let me just change the screen for a second here and see if I can do it on this one over here. Okay, so we'll perform the packing directly from the, in this case, an outbound delivery document, and hopefully in this case it'll work fine. So let's see, we'll click on the packing. And this one can't be packed because they're missing a batch. Okay, well, let's see if the training environment will let me skip that. And again, no luck. Okay, so no problem. Let me go back to my previous screen. And what I'll do is I'll try to access this from a different version, or maybe if I click on the editing portion here, there you go. Perfect. All right. So sorry, guys, and we're back on track here. So I was in display mode instead of the edit mode. So now I'm selecting the material we have here, and we click on the icon for packing. So I have the line selected. I'll click on the icon for packing. And it says, should the system search for allowed packing material? We can say yes. And we'll have a list of packaging materials that we can select to add to this item here. The one that I know we were selecting for the training environment was really not the best one, but I know it was one that worked. But nonetheless, we could probably select any of the ones that are here, like pallet or any other different type of packaging material that we should have, and it should be the same as the one that the vendors have provided to us. So we could simply click on the one we require or simply the one here. Let's see if I can just get a more generic version here, pallet, and click on OK. And once that is already selected, we see that we automatically have a handling unit that is generated from this packaging material. Okay, we simply double click on the handling unit. And once we're taken to the screen for handling unit, we can add in this tab the weight, volume, and dimensions of the goods. And we would have to add them in these sections here. So in this case, I can just add any sort of information because the training environment will just allow me to do so. You guys would just add the details that the vendor has provided. and we can select just anything that will at least allow me to see the difference in TM. We have our length. We can add the width, for example, here, and height, and also the measure here. Okay, once we've added the information, so basically under tear volume, also the unit of measure, loading volume, total volume, length, width, height, and the dimensions, we can click on enter. And it says here the handling unit was changed, and after I click on save, it should tell me that the material inbound delivery has been saved and the material has been packed. Okay, so basically if I went back to the inbound delivery, I should see the packaging information for this material that is done properly. Okay, and here it is. Okay, so now the information on the handling unit and the packaging material should appear when I go to the Rtm Status tab, now that I have saved it. So let's see if that works. We go to the Rtm Status tab, and we select the line, click on Document Flow, and here it is. Okay, the button is active now. If I click on it, we should be able to see all the packaging material information that we've just added. Okay, so we know it's been packaged, and the information related to it that I've added before will be here represented. Okay, but where we really want to see the impact is when we go into TM for this inbound delivery number. Okay, the problem that I was having with my other document, which is the STO, is the fact that I believe that it needs to be, the material type needs to be added first. See, I think it could not be packed because it needs the batching. Let me see if it would allow me anyway, but no, because it doesn't show me any materials here. But basically the function works the same. So the problem with the STO is that this material first needs to be batched managed, and I doubt that it's going to allow me to do this now. Not I could just solve the issue immediately, but I believe I can do that at a later time. Okay, so I can't package this. Let me just see if I can add anything, if it's not going to take me much more time. Any question on the packing so far, or the Rtm Status tab? If not, I just want to show you. Okay, there is a question. Zina?
Yeah, sorry, Brian. Just for the packing, you selected, for example, pallets.
Yes.
When you did the pallet, the drop-down came with the dimensions and the weight and other details that came when you selected the pallet. Now, if you were going, are those automated with the of packaging?
With the what? Sorry, you broke off there a bit.
Are those automated with the way it's being packed? I mean, for example, if it was a box or if it was something else, will we have other units of measures to be or other fields to fill in, or it's all the same?
Okay, there will be other units of measure. Like this was the screen we were looking at, I think.
For example, you selected pallet, okay?
Yes.
For the pallet, you had the weight, and then you had the length, and those types of measures that are requested, and then you selected them from the drop-down menu. Like
okay.
You have the weight, you have the loading weight, let's say. Okay?
Yes.
If it was like, if you didn't select a pallet, if you had selected a box, will it give the same field, or other fields will pop up? I mean, those.
Okay, good. Yeah, I see.
Related to the means of packaging, or it's a generic field better for every way of packaging?
Okay, very good question. As we've been practicing in the training environment, it's a generic screen for all means of packaging. It could be a container, a pallet, a box, or even bubble wrap paper, and these are still the same fields that appear in the training environment. If this is something that will change later on in production, we are not aware of. We've always been using the same generic screen to provide the details, but of course you don't have to, it's not limited to cubic meters. We can add different measures, but the fields will still be the same ones. It won't change if I change the packaging method. No, it's always going to be the same screen. It's always going to look the same.
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you, Zina. So now that we know that we have packed and the dimensions have been reflected in the TM Status tab, now when we know we have this information here, we could actually go into TM, search for this inbound that we're looking at here, and see if the packaging is also reflected. And then we can go and do some of the planning, okay? So basically what we have done so far is we have performed this function, which is the packing function as the inbound coordinator, once the inbound delivery document was created. We saw that the DTR and the freight unit were created automatically, and now we're going to jump into TM and start doing some planning. As we saw, this was an X work scenario, so that means that we're going to be on this side of the pillar, let's say, on this side of the planning stage, because we're looking at X work scenarios. So we're going to have to select the freight unit and do everything manually in terms of planning. Nothing that was the AP Incoterm showed up in this scenario. So let's go back to our inbound, which was this one over here. We make sure that we have the correct information, and I'm just going to have to log out from ECC and go into TM, so bear with me for a second. I'm going to pause the recording so we can skip that when you guys watch the video. Okay, so the recording's back on now. So we are here now in TM. Good thing is that in TM I can actually maximize the screen manually, which is easier for your eyes. Fine, so as I am the TM planner, I have the 3 tabs, remember that. Okay, so I would basically, what I should do as my first, let's say, action in TM as a TM planner is really go to the planning. Remember this from yesterday. Go to the transportation cockpit and check and see which freight units are pending to be planned. Okay, the first thing that will show up here is the planning profile. See, all the students are generating tons and tons of different planning profiles. We could always just use the same ones that someone else has created, and that would make our life easier. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to select the XWorks Incoterm one, which should be here, XWorks Forwarders at PLN, and click on the Continue button, and that should take us to the cockpit with a series of freight units. And here we go. Okay, yesterday this was blank, but now we have a series of freight units. Okay, so we know that this is working properly. We have all our freight units here, but let's say that we don't know what freight unit we're looking for, okay, because we don't have that information. We only have an inbound or a PO. So could we search for the inbound or the PO here? Well, we could do that as well. I believe that the transportation cockpit has, if we have that field available, we should have also visibility on the inbound, and in this case it says 0 matches. Let me just see what type of fields we have available. Remember, you click on the icon here and we can see we have the freight unit, unloading, loading, gross weight, execution, dangerous goods, but we have no fields for inbound or PO. So what we can do is look for them here and maybe say if we have purchase order, if that word is there, maybe we can just put order instead, and here it is. Okay, in TM it's the original order. So we select original order, we move it over, and now I want it to show up right at the beginning. So I make sure I click on that and click on the arrow to move it to the top. And now it will be my first column when I go back to the cockpit. I have the order. I want to see if I have the inbound. So I want to put the delivery, because that's the way it's called, and it's original delivery. Okay, so I can move that one also here, and it's actually gone right to the top here. Right, I can save, and now if you see, I should have a column for my POs, and I have a column for my inbound delivery documents. If I can expand this, actually let me maximize it because it always helps in terms of visibility. I want to move this over here. Remember that I couldn't do that yesterday, so I shouldn't be able to do it. It's moving now. Okay, perfect. Let's just minimize this one. We have PO here, inbound here, and we have our freight unit here. Okay, perfect. So now we can cross-reference this information. And now, see, when I put the same inbound, which is the 972, and I click on search, it says 2 matches now. See, so now it does find my inbound. So you can always just do that. You can come directly to the cockpit, search by inbound or PO, and you have your matching freight unit. And you see the icon? it's a package. So that means that the packing that I performed in ECC worked in TM, and now my freight unit shows as packaged. When it has an icon like the one above, it just shows the product. It doesn't show the packaging. So we're always looking for this box kind of brick look-alike icon here to understand that our goods have been packed. We can navigate, if you guys want to, we'll actually go back to our other screen here. Instead of going to the cockpit, remember we also showed you how to go through the ERP logistics, overview transportation, and we search for our inbound here. Let's display the fields. Let's add our original delivery number here, and we click on apply. That will display again our DTR in inbound and so on. So we're showing you both ways now. Okay, let's move over. And let's see, now we have our product, which shows at the bottom. See, right now I'm in administrative data. Let me go to general data. Okay, again, I'm looking at the DTR document, and we have all our information from the shopping cart. We have now gross volume 5, gross weight 3, cubic meters, kilograms. So we know that the info I added in ECC is actually there. Okay, the packing was done successfully. Everything else is there correctly, and our items line at the bottom shows handling unit. See, it shows us the packaging material, the packaging ID, and the product ID. Okay, so perfect. We have our this would actually be the 19 would be the packaging material used ID, and the packaging ID would be the handling unit, and the alternator right below it. So everything worked perfectly. Okay, that is good news. Okay, so we can close this window, go back to our cockpit, and let's do some planning from here. So now that I've searched using my inbound directly in the cockpit, all right, we have our PO, inbound, and freight unit. What I can do is simply select it and plan. Now, if you guys realize, there are 2 freight units here that end in 2595. Okay, and this can happen sometimes depending on the master data for the lanes in transportation. So according to the master data in TM, what TM is telling you is that you're going to need to plan at least 2, let's say, legs or stages. And why is that? One is because they're probably, they don't consider, or it hasn't been added accurately, that the actual vendor location is the same as the factory location. So it could be, or it doesn't have to be necessarily. And that's why TM is telling you that you're going to first need to connect your vendor location to this location that we have for its factory. That's why it's telling you you're going to need at least 2 stages. But basically, for all other scenarios, even though the ones you see here, the majority are going to be 1020, 1020. This means line 1, stage 1, stage 2, stage 1, stage 2. This is going to happen mostly in UNOE scenarios because the vendor locations are not exactly the same, or they're not in TM, in master data, the same as the ones for their factory. So TM is telling you you need at least 2 stages. To plan this scenario, you need to remember, select them both. You need to select both that have the same number. If it was 3, you'd select 3. If it was 10, you would select 10. In this case, there are 2. So we make sure they're both selected, and that's when we would go to transportation proposals. And now I'm going the simple way, right, which is to propose transportation for 1 single freight unit. I haven't combined any of them yet. Okay, we'll get to that later on, maybe tomorrow. And let's go through some of these so that it's clear for you guys. There's a lot to see. I'll click on proposals, and now we should get a list of proposals that will tell us how many stages we're going to have, how much it's going to cost us, the distance, the means of transportation, and so on. Any questions so far before I select the best proposal? Okay, well, all right. So this can happen sometimes. Sadly, it does happen in the training environment. In production, it shouldn't. It's just a timeout error, so we can just go through this really quickly again. Transportation cockpit. It's happened to me up to 3 times in one session. Hopefully this just happens once. The only problem with this is that when it does happen, sometimes it locks my freight unit and it doesn't allow me to plan it. So if that's the case, we can always just do another one. All right, so again, let's see. We still have our fields here. I'm going to add the inbound. Click on the magnifying glass. We have our two matches, so everything from now is still fine. We select them both, and we go to proposals again, and hopefully it doesn't time out, and hopefully it doesn't return the blocking error. So no error so far. It's still thinking, and hopefully this time it goes through. It is taking a bit too long, but it worked. Okay, perfect. So here we go. Again, we have our proposals. We're familiar with this already. Proposal 1, 2, 3, 4. So basically, it seems like they're in order. What this means is that we don't have any sort of filtering or sorting done in this particular case. Okay, no one has gone into the system and filtered by duration, by distance, by cost, or means of transportation, or anything similar. So if you see, the icons are basically boats and trucks, which means that our means of transport is going to be sea or truck. If we scroll down, we can see more of that, sea, truck, sea, truck. So basically there's no air transportation, at least in these 20 first generated proposals. Remember I told you guys yesterday that there's up to 20. You can change that too, but 20 is more than enough. Every time you go back and you generate a new proposal, you'll get another set of proposals. Okay, it's not always the same 20. What you do have here is that the transportation is going to have to occur by sea at least. Imagine if you have a filtering or a layout of, let's say, 500, I think here in the personalization icon, you can add see visible rows 34. You can add a lot more than that. Allow horizontal scrolling, sorting, conditional formatting. So you can play around with this a bit until it works for you. So basically the visible rows of 34 is what we can see from side to side. We have our standard view. We can also make a change there. Well, in this case, we don't have many options. We can add more columns. So all that is clear. We can filter here by clicking on Define Filter, and we can select that we want to filter by amount, by carrier, by cost, by means of transport. If you wanted to, let's say we have a long list of results and we want to only filter by means of transport, contains, and we want to say air. Okay, we can click on OK and see we would have absolutely no data in this case. Okay, so we won't accept any of that planning. We can delete the filter or simply change it and say that we want, in this case, C. And now we should have all our options back displayed. Okay, so we have them here. We could take a look at them and see that we have at least, remember as I was saying yesterday, 4 stages for the majority of the proposals. If I scroll up, it's 4, 4, 4, 4. So all of them are 4. It seems like we can't get rid of 4. We need at least that. And I'm thinking that we have 4 instead of 3 basically because of the short distance between the source location and the factory. Then we're going from factory to the port, port to Algiers port, and Algiers port to the mission. So we should basically only have these 3. Seoul factory if it's the same location as the vendor, and so on. So let's say that we want to sort by the ascending. I think it's not sorted by that, but I think this is the shortest distance first. If we want to change that and say, you know what, I want the longest distance first, we can do that too. I think in this case, all the master data is the same for the distance, so it doesn't matter what we choose. I believe maybe the cost can be the same too, but I think that will be one of the best filters. We can scroll right and say that we want to change the cost. So in this case here, we want to go with the most expensive, probably, at first, okay, because we just have enough money to pay for this most expensive one. Again, don't pay attention to these numbers as they're just training environment digits and they really don't mean much. Okay, we have our end date and transportation dates here. So let's say I want to use this one because it's the most expensive one. You see it's proposal 16. I can move over to the left. And again, this is just for practice, so I'm going to go with this one. What this one says is that it's going to go from Seoul factory to Incheon port and then Conakry port and Conakry port to final destination. So fine, I'll select that. We're going to have at least 4 freight orders and we accept the planning. If everything works correctly, we have our 4 freight orders And now our freight unit should be divided into 4. So I'm going to maximize this so you guys can see that. It's a bit slow. See if I can. Okay, doesn't seem like I can make it bigger, but nonetheless, if I maximize, I'll see that now we have these sections here. So we have, let's say, we're looking at 1 that is planned. Okay, so in this case, if I maximize it, it shortens the amount of freight units that I have there. Okay, so we have our freight orders here to the left. If we like them, remember yesterday I showed you guys about the map. If you want me to show you again, just raise your hand and tell me. If not, I understand you guys are okay with it. And maybe we can just move on with the accepting of these freight orders. Okay, so I'm going to click on OK. These numbers will transform into the actual documents, and we're good to go. Okay, so now we have planned our freight orders for the inbound delivery number that we were performing the packing for before. So what I want to do now is first in TM show you where we can see all the stages. If you remember well, it was in the freight unit. And then I want to go back into ECC and show you from the inbound delivery document that these freight orders have been generated. Okay, so we have, let's click on this. Let me not go here. Let me go directly to the freight unit instead. Okay, remember, you guys can navigate to any of these just by clicking on them. Let's take a look at what that freight unit looks like, and it shows us in the document flow, DTR, inbound, and eventually 4 stages, 4 freight orders that are freight forwarder delivered. If remember what I told you guys on the first few days, the folder here will display more tabs. You go to stages, and in stages you have the full transportation route, the means of transport, where it's going to, where it's coming from, and the dates, and all the way to the end we have the carrier, which is the dummy. So you know by looking at the screen that no one has assigned carrier. We see that the status of the stages is not loaded, so nothing has happened yet, and the hyperlinks are here for each one of them. Okay, I showed you guys that if you were the TS02 or TS08, right, in the screen, if you guys were doing any of the editing of the FOs with route, states, and charges, the additions have to be made to the freight orders, okay? Always in the freight orders and always in the main leg. Remember that? So in this case, main leg would be anything going from one port to another. So if I, let's say, take the destination location here and I move it over, right, let's move it over here so we have them both clearly one next to each other. Which one should I have to edit here? It would be this one, right? Incheon port to Conakry port. This is the one I should have to edit if I was editing the freight orders. Now, there are some cases, usually FCA cases, okay, FCA Incoterm cases, where you can edit the freight unit, the one we're looking at, directly. All right, you can just simply click on the edit button, and you see how these become available automatically. If you click on the button, change Incoterm location. If this were an FCA scenario, okay, it's an X-work scenario, you could change the handover location right from the freight unit. But this is a very exceptional case scenario. Remember, you should always make the updates in the freight orders. But just so you know, it's possible that you can do it from the freight unit in an FCA Incoterm scenario by clicking on change Incoterm location. If you clicked on it, it would tell you what location you want to search for. This is similar to what we saw yesterday. We could search by port. If you know the exact name of the port, you would add it here. In this case, there seems to be no results because I put is. It's always better to search by contains, and that should give you more results. Okay, and if you know exactly which one, you would simply select it and then click on OK, and that would change your Incoterm location. But again, this is only for FCA scenarios. So I'm going to cancel this. This was just extra data that I wanted to give you guys. Okay, so we saw that, and now what I want to do is log out of TM, and sorry for all these login and logouts, but I think it's interesting to see both versions from ECC and from TM. We'll go back to the document flow, So again, what we're looking at now is that we want to see that in the inbound delivery document in ECC, we can now see also the 6.1 documents. There should be 4 of them when I go to this inbound in ECC. Okay, so let's close this out. And again, I'll stop the recording until I get to the... Okay, like this, you guys don't waste any time when you're watching the video. All right, we're going to our Rtm Status tab. Remember that in the inbound delivery document. We select the line, we click on document flow, and here we go. See, if you click on the inbound and you go to the Rtm status, you will see now, see DTRs, freight unit, and 1, 2, 3, and 4 freight orders that already have been planned. So that's how you can see directly from ECC if someone has already planned your freight unit, if it's still pending to be planned, if it's actually a freight forwarder stage, it says it right there, FF delivered. If it were vendor delivered, it would actually say vendor delivered or V delivered. You have a little more information here to the right. If you see planned freight order, freight forwarder delivered. So all that info is right there under the tab, Rtm Status tab. So again, reminder, Rtm Status, document flow, and here we go. Okay, so basically that is just to help you guys understand that you can see the status of a freight unit, both from ECC by looking at the inbound delivery or from TM by searching for your DTR freight unit as I was teaching you before. Okay, there you go. I was going to say, any questions? Yes. Okay, Zina?
2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
2 questions. First, are we going to merge in with the second WebEx, or you're going to continue, right? We don't need to accept this log out and log in again, or what?
Exactly, yeah, just continue. We're going to continue till 3:30 with this session.
Okay. Now, the question is, from practice in the mission, we have DAP and FCA. So, the scenario you provided is for experts. Is it exactly to the FCA? Is there a change in particular?
Okay, well, the truth is what I did, the only difference is for DAP and FCA is that for DAP, you would do absolutely nothing, okay? You would do the packing eventually, but you don't have to do anything in TM as it's already automatically planned. If you went to the TM Status tab, like I did now, you would already see freight orders planned, and they would all be vendor delivered. So that means that since this is a DAP scenario, you wouldn't have to do much, right, or anything at all as a TM planner. And as a, let's say, as if you were an FO manager, which would be the TS02, you would have to do nothing either. You basically, once it's a DAP scenario, the vendor takes care of everything, submits events. Sorry?
Not even packaging?
Yes, that's, I mentioned at the beginning, the packaging, you would still have to add it in ECC. Okay, because that wouldn't be reflected automatically as of yet. I'm not sure if you have been told about this, but the EDI system will eventually, in the future, hopefully very near future, will update the packing details from the vendor directly into our system. And we won't have to worry about that either in the short, near future, okay? But for now, we still have to be doing this. Once we're onboarded with EDI, we won't have to do it either, okay? So packaging is only temporarily for now that we have to manually input it. And you'd have to do so for DAP, for FCA, for XWorks. The main difference between the three is that for XWorks, you saw that I had to actually plan the freight unit to get all the freight orders. For FCA, you would already have maybe 1 or maybe 2 freight orders already here because they would be the vendor managed legs, right, up to handover location. You would have to simply go into TM, look for your freight unit, and plan the last 2 legs. Okay, but basically you're not making a difference between if it's the last 2 or the first 2. You're going into TM, you're searching for your freight unit, and you're planning it. Maybe if you want, we can also plan one of those FCA so we see the difference too. Okay, but yeah, absolutely, we can do that. But just so you know, there is really no difference in what we just did, whether it's one or the other. The only major difference is DAP that you don't even have to do a thing.
Okay, yeah, no, that
only the packing.
Yeah. Another question about DAP. Yes, Hassan, coming up.
start to the freight line, the vendor will be responsible from A to Z.
Sorry, I only heard A to Z.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So for the DAP, the vendor will be responsible to deliver the goods from the wherever he's preparing it up to the mission, right?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. So the cost will be like the packing will be done by the vendor, or it's still done by the RNI, inbound delivery.
Okay, the packing is always done by the vendor. What the inbound delivery or inbound coordinator would have to do is simply add those details in ECC. But that happens for FCA, for DAP, and for XWorks, for all three.
And there will be no costs for the freight, right? Appear in the list.
There will be no cost for freight on the list. You mean of the packaging details?
Yeah. Besides, like after completing the packing, there is an additional line for the cost for the delivery. That one will not appear, right?
And this was when we were doing the packing. So let me see if I'm understanding that portion. So here, for example, we did, when I accessed the inbound and I went to packing, in this section, you mean?
No, like order is there. There was the TM model.
In the TM, Brian, not in the...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in the TM, there is like one column for the cost.
Yes, there's one tab for charges, right?
Yeah, for the charges. That will appear at the DAP.
Exactly. You'll have the same column will be there, and since you perform the packaging, the estimated cost will be reflected in TM as well, even for DAP. But again, these are just estimated costs, because they're based on the master data that we have in TM according to the volume or dimensions that we've added in ECC. Okay, they're not final costs, but they will appear. They will be estimated costs.
Okay, estimated cost, but the next step, there will be no interview pay the shopping cart.
Did you hear that, Brian?
There will be no FO in the shopping cart? Oh, okay.
The SOW
No.
will be created during the planning. So
Yeah, exactly. In DAP cases, no, you don't have to worry about that, because you already have those prices, if I'm not mistaken, contracted with the vendor, correct? All this has happened beforehand.
yes.
And if there are DAP scenarios, all these costs have already been, yes, agreed on and signed off on, yes.
Yes, okay.
Okay, clear.
All right. Sorry, it's just that every other word, it's broken off.
I'm sorry, that is probably our internet, but when I'm asking the questions, is it not clear? Because Raymond was saying that in the other room they're not hearing me. Although I find myself very loud, but was my voice not going through?
It may sound on purpose, but when you speak, it's perfectly clear and loud. It's when everyone else speaks that it breaks.
Okay, thank you for the compliment, Brian. You're wonderful.
Yes. I don't know why it's happening like that, but it's happening like that. If you speak, it's fine. Everyone else who starts speaking is just all over the place. The mic starts breaking off.
Okay, probably maybe they're not, because maybe I'm in front of the computer. I think it's clear, right? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks. Anybody else?
All right, perfect.
Thanks. Yeah, if you can please go back and give us a quick FCA scenario, if it's possible.
Sure. So, absolutely. So what I'm going to do is, since I don't have one here available, I'm going to go back into TM, planning profile for FCAs. I'm going to take a look at a freight unit, and I'm going to work from there. Okay, so recording again. So for an FCA scenario, I'm performing the same exact steps as I did for an XWorks scenario. The only thing that will change will be when I go to planning and the cockpit, the planning profile page now I have to select the planning profile for an FCA. Okay, so in this case, these were all XWorks. Here I'm going to go to this FCA that Antoine has written here. Let me just make sure it is correct. All right, so remember we have our planning profile is always the same for any case, but when we go to our freight unit selection profile, we have to make sure that we change it. So it is UNOE forwarder delivered. Let's see, let me click on the matchbox here and make sure I'm selecting the correct one, which is this one. Yes, so everything is fine. And I will continue. And now I should only see in the cockpit the freight units, and in this case, they're all blank. Great. I may log in or use some other details. That's the thing. Since I didn't prepare for that one, I shouldn't have it. But in this case, you'd have all the... okay. Zina?
Yes, I think you have to deselect. If you go back to the screen before, there was something selected. So deselect that one, and then
all right.
the XWork was selected. So deselect the XWork and then select the.
Okay, so right now I have the FCA selected here, or let me just see
the
if...
one on top, the one on is selected on default set. So deselect that.
Okay, oh, good observation. Okay, let's see if
now it'll work.
that should be that should make the difference. In the training environment I've seen, sometimes it didn't make a difference, but it could in this case. Let's see. I doubt it because sometimes it just skips that. So I don't have anything available here. I can try maybe with another user really quick and see what I can show you. Because it seems like this user is only mapped to the XWork scenarios. This one, let me add a new one and see if by adding a new one, be a bit luckier there. Let's see. Okay, so I'm basically just adding a new profile, which is for the FCA scenario. So you have to select this line here. I'm just going to put training here, and let's save it. Let me take the default out of this one. And I'm not going to use any as the default. I'm just going to go and make sure that I have the correct one. So training is selected, and hopefully I'll save and continue and see if that shows me anything. And that's what I thought. All right, so it seems like this one's only mapped for the XWork scenario one. Let me see if I can quickly find a new one, and hopefully that one works. Maybe for UNOA, I have other user names here that I can search for. I can't guarantee that they work, but hey, we're better trying. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to try this guy here. And again, I'm going to just quickly stop. Okay, so I'm back to the recording. So basically, you guys have followed. So now I use the planning profile for FCA, and we have a set of freight units that we should have to plan. So you see at this point, nothing has really changed for us. Everything we're doing, all the actions that we're performing are the same. The only difference was that we had to select the FCA planning profile. That's it. If I click on, for example, this freight unit, I want to take a look at the documents generated, and here you go. Here we can already see a difference. So this freight unit shows in my cockpit as you have to plan this, right? TM Planner, you have to go on and plan this, but you already see two freight orders there. If you look to the left, it says VN delivered, so it's vendor delivered. So there are already two stages that are planned already ahead of time, but it still shows in the cockpit because you still have to plan the rest of the stages. Okay, if I move over, I'm going to look at 1833 is the one I'm looking at here. I'm going to maximize the screen so we can all follow. If you see the loading location and unloading location for 1833, it's Brindisi Port. Remember for XWorks, it was the actual vendor location and then the factory for the vendor. Here it's Brindisi Port, so this is the handover location. So you're only planning from handover on to the final destination. But you as a planner, you're really not doing anything different. Okay, I see a message there for microphone. I think I'm being heard properly. If not, let me know. Okay, so you're only planning these two, but really you're not doing anything different in terms of clicks or actions. But it's true that it's important for you to understand that the loading and unloading mean exactly that, handover location and final destination. And we have our freight unit that shows us the 2 vendor delivered stages for this freight unit that are already planned. I can even go back into ECC, which I'm going to do now. Let me just take a quick note of this inbound, 79635. And I'm going to do what I did before. I'm going to go into ECC. I don't have to log out of TM. Okay, so we can do this one quickly. And we can test here. Okay, looking at the PO, or the actual inbound. So let's see. We have that information here. Maybe we can just change second. Okay, so we would just have to look for our PO in this case. Okay, the inbound is 1979635. Okay, maybe I can just go, instead of looking for the PO, I can use the T code to search for the inbounds. In this case is VL06I, if I'm not mistaken. Oh wow, okay. Good memory. All right, so let's go to the list of inbounds. And let's add the inbound delivery number, or the actual, here's the purchasing document number that I don't need. Okay. Inbound delivery, here we go. 635, and make sure I'll just take the dates out here and see what I get. All right, so here we go. And let's access that document. All right, so we're in the inbound delivery document that I'm looking at in TM, just to make sure that when I go to TM status, click on the inbound and go to document flow, I should see exactly that. See, a DTR, a freight unit, and 2 freight orders, and you see vendor delivered, both of them. So you know that, okay, this should be an FCA Incoterm scenario. Just by looking at this screen, I should be able to understand that. You can also see that packing hasn't been performed yet for this particular one. I could do it right now, just as a refresher. We can add the packing for this too, and we'll see that this becomes available. Okay, so far, here you go. 2 vendor delivered stages, just like the ones we saw in, let's see, display here. We're in TM, we're looking at the freight unit, 2 vendor delivered, and we're in the inbound, 2 vendor delivered. Okay, almost the same exact information in one and the other. All right, so I think that helps. We're going to go on with the planning so we see the difference, but just so we can perform the same actions, let's go to the item overview. We will select our line and see if we can perform packing in this case. Let me go back, because now it's edit first. Okay, pack. And now we're fine. All right, so we select the line, perform the packing here. Okay, if I do that, automatically the system tells me it searches for the packaging materials for me. So we said that we selected pallets before, right? So let's select another one, like wrap bubble. And that should be quite different from a pallet. And we select that option. We have our handling unit. We double click on it, and the tab for volume weight is exactly the same as the one before. Okay, so we basically have the same details. We're going to add here maybe 200 tera volume, for example. I'm just adding any data that is not the same as the one I've added before. In this case, we'll just keep 29,000, and tera volume, we'll add 500, and we're just adding nonsense, I know, but it's just to move through the process quickly. Okay, so we would have that. We'd click on Enter. We say that the handling unit is changed, and when we save, we have our packaging. So here it says that it's planned, so it may not, okay? It's telling you that, Okay, now it says it's been saved because it already has planned 2 vendor-delivered stages. Nonetheless, it shouldn't make a difference in terms of what we see in the TM Status tab. But it just gave you that warning message because, see, in this case, it's not really identifying the packaging because these 2 have already been planned automatically. So in this case, we should have packed immediately right from the beginning, and this wouldn't happen, okay? Because some of them were already planned. I don't even know the dates. They're probably too late already. I don't even know what dates these are supposed to be delivered on. It says 20th here, but I'm not sure exactly the date. I can look in TM. Nonetheless, this was just the idea of showing you the packaging all over again and how the vendor-delivered stages show up in TM. Okay, anything on that? I'm going to continue maybe with the planning. We're in the cockpit, so maybe you want me to continue with the planning so you see how the how this works. All right, if you don't interrupt me, I take it that that's what you want me to do. So I'm going to, again, still select this same freight unit, bring DC port. Okay, so there is a question. So Zina, you're unmuted. You can speak up.
Okay, for the packing cases, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah. For packing, we have normally, if we pack in containers, if it's a container.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a UN container, and sometimes it's a freight forwarder container. So is there an option for that? How will that be dealt with? Is there something different? Does the system differentiate, like, because sometimes it's a UN container, and then it comes in with the goods, and then it's included as well. It's shipped out, especially if it was done through, like, from a mission to another mission, for example.
Okay, I see. So let me see. Let me go back to the Matchbox if I can here and search. I don't think that we have exactly a UN container versus a vendor container. I think it's generic, and it just goes by dimensions.
Because sometimes, just a second.
Yes, yes.
In this case, Brian, we
yes.
would like to know exactly about the FCA, and the container is belong to the freight forwarder. So he will load the goods inside the container and bring it to the mission, load the goods, and we will receive it. So we need that scenario.
Okay, you need this scenario. You're only performing the packing once at the vendor stage. After that, you're not adding the packaging material information.
Yeah, but when we do the packing, like pack in a container, so the freight forwarder will know that there is one container, bring the goods up to the mission.
He'll take the container back.
The freight forwarder is going to take the container back. What I'm not understanding is I don't think the information that you're asking me to show you, you're not supposed to add this in ECC or in TM at any point. If the vendor or freight forwarder is supposed to take the container back, there's really no option to add that here in the packing details.
In the new SOP for the product ID, that we have to know exactly if the container belongs to, like this belongs to forwarder for the transportation only.
Okay, I see. So I'm following. So the new SOP says that you have to indicate that at least, right? If it's the a UN.
To the new PIDs, we have to know exactly how the goods will be transported to final destination. Is it coming like a loose weight? Is it by air? Is it by sea? There is a sea container. The sea container is purchased. The UN, just for the, it belongs to the freight forwarder, and just for the transportation.
Okay, because I'm looking at the container information here, the options that we have. If these things that you're saying are very valid, and actually they may not have been thought of or implemented yet in ECC or in Umoja in general, what I see here is at least two types of containers, but in this case, none of these two would say vendor or UN-owned container. Let's see if we have.
We prepare all the information correctly in order to have the SOW correct, and we proceed. So the shopping cart will be created according to the SOW.
The shopping cart for freight, yes. When you add the SOW attachment, that will reflect the cost, the estimated cost that at least that we're planning for. Not necessarily the final cost, but the way we're packaging it, how it has to be transported, and yes. So all that information should be as detailed as possible.
Even like the freight forwarder, he must know exactly what is our requirement.
I see what you're talking about. So mainly, if I'm following correctly, it's the options of packaging need to be very clear, and they need to be multiple, right? You need to have at least as many as the vendor uses or the freight forwarder is going to be using, so that we're all on the same page. We can't give them the information on packaging that is not 100% accurate, because then that's going to affect our transportation, correct?
Yeah, right. Because normally the goods, when coming out from the vendor, from the supplier, it is already packed either in a small boxes or containers or whatever. But for the transportation, the freight forwarder, he needs to know exactly our requirement. He needed to be transferred like on a pallet, on a small boxes, on wooden boxes, or like in a sea container.
Particularly if we're going to be keeping the container after that.
I see. Okay, so
like we need to purchase the container from the freight forwarder. In case the mission needed, like we need to purchase the containers from the freight forwarder. So all these are additional costs to the freight charge.
I see.
Because Brian,
okay, so
the container is not going to be a new container. So when it's going to be shipped and it's going to be kept, the product ID for that one is going to be not new. It's going to be old, because then it will come into its used container transportation. So when the product ID for that particular container will have to be not a new purchase container. So the moment it's been used for transportation, it's not a received container. So it affects in both ways. If it was an extra charge, we're going to keep it, or another charge if it was just for transportation and we're not keeping it. And all these details are to be included in the SOW that's going to be attached to the shopping cart or freight that will be created.
I see. Yeah, the only details I see here with container are if it's 20-foot or 40-foot packaging reference. I don't see anything related to vendor container, old container, used, or anything of the matter, at least not in the training environment. If it's going to be added and you will be able to select the accurate description in production, I'm unaware of yet. I mean, this is something you guys can check if you have the inbound coordinator access, right?
Yeah, it's you know why? Because Brian, if the container is just a means of transportation, it's not going to come into the inventory. But if it is not a means of transportation only, it's going to be a means of transportation and will be a UN-owned equipment. So it's going to be as if we're purchasing UN-owned equipment in a freight document, and the fact that it's not going to be a new purchase, and the fact that it has to have a special PID for the container, not the PID for the freight. And the container will be, you understand what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's going to be 2 in 1. If it's going to be kept, it's going to be 2 in 1. If it's not going to be kept, then it has to be included in the SOW to the freight forwarder and in the shopping cart for the freight.
I see.
But the cost will be like purchasing one container for the UN plus the transportation of the goods. Freight charge.
And when you're purchasing the container, right, in a sense, let's say this is an FCA scenario, you're purchasing it from the vendor,
Yes.
Not
and
from the
eventually
vendor,
that's
from the freight forwarder.
from the freight forwarder. So that's why you're adding that container line to the shopping cart for freight.
Yes. It's going to turn out to be as if you're purchasing material
Yeah.
on the shopping cart for freight,
Exactly.
if that will be the case, because it has to enter into the inventory.
Exactly, yeah. And it doesn't make sense, of course, because you can't add it to the one for goods.
Add it to the, exactly. You can't add
Yeah.
it to the goods that that you're going to be purchasing, not in the purchase order for goods, because you're purchasing a used item. You're not purchasing a new item in a purchase order from a vendor or supplier.
Okay, 'cause I'm just thinking, how would you, if you're performing the packaging from the vendor side, that information is going to be the one that appears in the SOW. So the SOW will have the packing details of that you included from the vendor side, which says if it's a container, you're going to be writing there the packaging details of a container, but what you actually want is to purchase the container from the freight forwarder. So
Yeah, because
in a sense,
if it
yeah.
was not going to be purchased from the
Mm-hmm.
freight forwarder, it's okay. But that detail has to be in the scope SOW. But if we're going to be purchasing, because probably the vendor will ship it in a container, but says, I don't want the container, you will have to pay for the container. So in that case, we'll have to, first thing, the charges will be more. Second thing, that container is going to be UN property. It has to come
All right.
into the
So
inventory.
I'm taking note of everything we're discussing here, since basically I don't have the final answer. I'm going to make sure I send this over to the guys in New York, the people that we have there working on it, and see if they can provide us with details on what should we do, okay, in a case like this.
Thank you.
How is it? Okay, and then I'll get back to you guys. Maybe we can even have a session like we did yesterday and record it to explain exactly what should be done in the system.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks, Brian.
All right. But thank you, guys. So should I even continue with the planning of the
Yes,
unit that I was, yeah?
Yes, please do. Please
Okay.
do.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I'm heading back to the interesting conversations too. So thank you, guys. These are definitely things that we want to bring up to New York. So again, basically, I'm going to plan for this freight unit in TM. I'm going to transportation proposals, and now you'll have to learn how to read these new transportation proposals. So it's going to look the same as before, but there's small details that will let you know that some of these legs are already planned, because we're going to actually see the legs that have been planned already. You see now, if you look at the screen, let's look at the first proposal. You have stage 1, and you actually have a number already, the execution number here. You look at stage 2, and you have one as well. What does that mean? These are the vendor delivered freight orders. So the system is telling you that these 2 stages are already planned. The only thing you're planning are these other 2. If you realize, the one with the envelope and the green check mark are the ones that you are planning for. The other 2 are done already. That's why it says their freight order costs 0. What we're looking at is these 2. Okay, so I'm just going to go with this first one. Let me make sure. Okay, so let me select the first option here, which is just 2 stages. So I'm only going to get 2 freight orders that I'm supposed to approve later on. Okay, so accept planning. Let's see what it looks like in the cockpit. And there you go, right? You have the 2 freight orders. So basically, that's what we're going with. We can say save. It's jumping back to ECC. Okay, let's click on save. We did already. We have our 2 freight orders here for the freight unit that is 41401834. Okay, I'm just taking note of that one. As I'm going back and forth so much, I'm not going to remember which one I just planned. All right, we can access our freight orders directly from here. Now let's take a look at what the SOWs look like for each one of these freight orders. Okay, the vendor delivered one and the freight forwarder delivered one, because I think that's something you're interested in as well. So I'm going to click on the freight unit. Let's see But now we have still vendor delivered, so let's refresh. Actually, let's get out of the edit and click on refresh. We should get the other two. This is refreshing enough. It's 1834. Back. And click on the freight orders instead. Maybe from here, go to the freight unit. So document flow. This only shows one, of course, because I'm only looking at that one freight order, so I'm only getting one. Let me click on the freight unit, which is 1833. All right, so I don't even know how to jot down numbers. Okay, so here we go. We have the two vendor and the two freight forwarder delivered. Okay, we have them all four now here. Okay, it was 33. I wrote down 34. No wonder I couldn't find it. Okay, so we have this one. And it all says in process, in planning, so nothing has been done for these yet. Let's take a look at the vendor delivered freight order, and then I'm going to come back and look at a freight forwarder delivered. And let's take a look at the SOW option here. Okay, so first we'll go to the charges. Now the problem is we won't have any charges because it wasn't letting me pack. Okay, so we don't have any charges here. We will have charges in the one I did before, okay, the first one I did. Which we can go back to later on. But let's go to the execution tab. We have our events. Okay, this is all very late stuff, November 13th. That's why I couldn't do any packing, because the planned date was like way too late already. It's almost a month. That's why I couldn't perform the packing there. So let's go to output, and let's look at the SOW form. For the vendor delivered, okay, we're still looking at the vendor delivered part, and let's scroll down. And I think here, so this one's telling us that this one is linked to 1, 2, 3, and 4 different POs. The inbound delivery, same thing, and another 2 different freight orders here that it's linked to. So at least one more freight order that it's linked to. We have details on the requirements. We're all familiar with this. We see that the origin, destination, Incoterm, and the information. So in this case, see, we don't have any package ID information. Now, I did tell you guys yesterday, you can always print this or download this form and edit some of the information. So if it's not interesting for us to have the package information or the dimension information, we can always remove it and just simply have the raw goods value data there as well, but we'd have to do this manually. The system will always calculate it depending on what we've added as the packaging details. But this is what it looks like for the vendor delivered stage. Okay, we have the dates, we have the information here, and where it's going from and where it's coming to. Okay, for each one of the purchase orders that it's linked to. Okay, I think they're all transporting the same thing. That's why the price is the same for all. And then the consignor and consignee. Okay, for the vendor delivered. If I close and go to the freight forwarder delivered, and I look at the SOW for that, it should be very, very similar. SOW short form, document preview. And in this case, see, these are only linked to one PO, one inbound, and different freight orders. And the info on this should be very similar. We should have, of course, different destination, because now this is the one for the freight forwarder delivered, and details on the goods value, which is the same because we're not counting the packaging there either. Okay, so basically this is how the SOWs would look. You have the SOWs for the vendor delivered that contain all the POs and inbounds that the same vendor is going to be transporting together. So if we go back to that vendor delivered freight order, in the SOW document, all those POs that appear there and all those inbounds that appear are the ones that are linked to the same vendor. So, of course, we're going to have so many. So the same vendor is supposed to be responsible for all these POs, all these inbounds, and all these goods being transported. Okay, that's why it looks slightly different from the freight forwarder one. And the origin location and destination location is also different. Okay, so we would have one SOW for one section, one SOW for the freight forwarder. Okay, I think that's quite clear. We saw this yesterday as well. Now, in terms of updating charges and making any changes, what I want to do that with the other user that we were using before, because I did the packing and I want you guys to see how the charges are impacted by that packing. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video again, go back. We still have 30 minutes, so it's plenty of time to do that and even submit some events. I'm going to start the recording again. Okay, so because I think this will be interesting to look at later on. If we go back to the, now I'm going to look for the freight order based on that freight unit. Okay, so we can pick it back up again. And let's see if I can take this information and see, change query. The information inside the freight order is still going to be visible by the TS02 and 08. So you could always go back in and look and see the means of transport in every stage by looking at the freight unit information. So that is something that won't be hidden from you. It will just be hidden from the freight forwarder. Unless you want to add it in the notes, you can add that as well in the notes section.
They need exactly from us to select the correct product ID and put, because I believe SOW first, and later on we start with the shopping cart and send it for approval, and it goes to buyer to TS0, TS08. Process the purchase order for freight. Don't select at the beginning shopping cart. The whole process will be like, let's say, wrong. Because ID is
Okay, so this exact product ID for air or sea or truck, are there many different IDs, or is there one for each?
yes, totally different.
There are many.
Totally
Okay,
different.
how is it that no one has brought this up in any training?
No, it's not many. There's because I think everybody, as I saw a previous example, we're using multiple.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
there is air and sea and land. Road. Land.
Okay.
So because that process is going to be the one before the next process in where procurement will be doing the solicitation for the freight and selecting it. So that should be done in the shopping cart and
shopping cart
at a previous stage, not after. So you were saying we can see it and it's available for us to see during the planning, but it won't be at the stage that it has already been identified yet.
Can you put the SOW on full screen view?
It's on screen now.
Full screen.
This is
Doesn't have anything. Doesn't have. He said
on full screen, and this is as full as it gets. I really have no other way of.
no, I mean we've tried
You
to
see
go
the.
up and down.
Oh,
Multi-model
okay. So okay.
shipment.
So let's say this is the SOW here.
The text says multi-model surface shipment. It just says multi-model surface shipment. So it says qualified vendors for the provision of multi-model.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, because if
But we have
because we have by air. I mean, we could.
by air, by road only.
Yeah. For example, vaccines. We have it all by air.
So
We take it by air.
what happens when you don't add that information in the shopping cart for freight? The freight forwarder will not provide you with information, or they'll come back and say, well, we offer this by sea, we offer this by air, or not.
It's not
Or
going
you
to
have
be
to be as specific as.
no, because I mean, when we do the shopping cart,
Mm-hmm.
with the product ID, not the specific product ID, it's going to be more or less a generic product ID. And after that, it will be decided by procurement after the solicitation how the means are, and all this data will pop up later in TM. But at the stage of creating the shopping cart in SRM, based on the planning that is done in TM, it won't have that particular detail, or so you're going to go with a product ID that is a generic product ID, not knowing how it's going to be planned. I mean, you're going to be planning, but you don't know the actual. So the shopping cart has to have a generic PID where it goes
Yeah.
later on to procurement, and then when procurement do the purchase order for freight, it's going to then only identify exactly the means or the method of transport.
Well, I think these type of questions, because they're very business related, when we have this TM session in the morning, right, the MS Teams, sorry, in the morning, that session we have for 1 hour, if you join those sessions, usually we have people like Sasha Morganic and other business pros that are there, and they have more info. You joined it?
Yeah, we do join every day. We're doing
Okay.
both the morning one and the afternoon. I mean, the morning
And
one,
you're asking these questions in both sessions?
to be honest, we're not participating very much like we are with you, because this is dedicated for us, because we're a little bit behind the others. So in the morning session, it's only when they're showing something. Sometimes we ask questions, but most of the time we're only asking you because you're more in line with where we are. I mean, the rest they're
Okay,
more.
I see. And it makes sense. Maybe you're wondering, they already answered this, no? So let's ask Brian. So this is an excellent question, and the fact that nobody had mentioned about the PIDs for air or sea or truck and them being very specific. If you look at the freight unit that I'm displaying now on screen, the stages do define if it's road C. So you could always add information based on this in the SOW. The problem is when you're selecting a product ID in the freight shopping cart, if you have to be so specific, that is something I was unaware of, that you have to actually select the means of transport as a product ID. I thought you could just skip that portion and really just add, I don't know really how you were raising this, because Himanshu and people from New York were always saying that the process is the same as you always do. So there's no real change in the process to shopping cart for freight except the fact that you're attaching an SOW.
Yeah.
It's really the main difference. So if you always selected a means of transport C, you should still continue to select C.
Yeah, that's true. But because before there was no, there was a generic product ID. I mean, now they're more in the new guidelines. They're more specific on the product IDs. So because of course, the product IDs more or less affects the financial aspect later on because it's all budget related as well. So correct product IDs put you under the correct GL account, under the correct, because of the B, you know, the new budgets in Emoja, all the things that the UE2. So we have to be very specific because all the purchase orders are reflected in the UE2, and it is reflected according to the product ID to take it from the proper GL account. I don't want to sound very complicated. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. But it's
I follow enough for someone who doesn't do this daily. You know, I'm basically, I teach you guys how to use the systems, but when it comes to really intricate business-related questions,
I know you do know a lot, but I mean, just to tell you that the product ID is very, very, very important to be very specific. So we sometimes know, like for example, we have FTA or DAT for vaccines, for example, but we know that this comes by air. So in that case, we could predict, we could put the product ID by air because we know that one is by air. Some of the things we know come, I mean, some of the material or equipment, they come in containers by sea. We know that off our heads, out of practice, out of experience. We put that. But sometimes there's sea and road, there's air, sea and road, there's only sea, only road. Those we don't know exactly. So we need to be very specific when we raise the shopping carts. Did you get it?
Yeah, what I'm getting from your explanation is that I think there needs to be an integration session on freight shopping carts as well, because this is data that everyone should be aware of.
Yes.
We haven't been delivering any integration sessions on freight shopping carts. We've focused on goods, and we're leaving the freight shopping cart aside because we're saying all the time, it's like you always do it. But if now things are changing, we need to get into that as well. All right. Well, okay, I'm taking note of that one too. Okay, now I have two really good questions from you guys. And I'm going to forward this over to the team that in New York that is in Nairobi right now and see what they can tell me. And I'll get back to you guys with some more info. And even on maybe if we can have a session dedicated to freight shopping carts.
Great. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome.
Over to
Okay.
you.
So, all right. Thank you. So I see we still have a little bit of time, and I don't know if enough to do the submission of events. And again, I would have to definitely leave this session and log into the one I was using before because all these were already past events. So again, let me just log in again, but now I'm going to use the other user I used earlier. And let's see if we can get to at least submit one of the, okay, this one of the events. Okay, so you guys can see that. Okay, so we were looking for, I believe the inbound delivery number was ending in, or at least we can always go for the PO, which would be faster. Okay, so let's look for the PO. And now since we have packaging details, actually I think it's the 772. Yes, it is. Click on that. And let's take a look at the freight orders. I remember we had at least 3, if I'm not mistaken. Well, in this case, we had 4. Okay, that's true. Okay, so let's take a look at these freight orders first, really quick, just to see the difference between these and the ones we were looking at prior that weren't packed. And we should have under the Charges tab, we should have some sort of information. I think in this case, see, this is making me look bad because we don't even have estimated charges. So the master data in the training environment is not even reflecting the estimated charges for the amounts that have been added here. They're based on the gross volume, the estimated charges, and also based on historical data. So we should have something based on what we have here, at least some sort of estimated charge. In this case, we don't. So let's see tomorrow if I can do something different in the packing. We have better results. But nonetheless, we saw this already. Remember that to add the charges, we would click on Edit and add the actual charges in the actual charge line. We would already have the estimated ones there. We'd add this information here, click on Save, and that would be pretty much it for the actual charges. We also learned that we can change in the stages. If this were the main carriage, this is where we would perform the changes. Again, clicking on Edit and making changes to the source location, destination location, but always in the main carriage. Remember, the one from airport to airport or port to port. So let's cancel this one. The same thing with the dates. In the Stages tab, we can make changes to the dates if the freight forwarder tells us that there are different dates. And since we saw that yesterday and we only have another maybe 9 minutes or so, let's go to the Execution tab because this is brand new for you guys. The Execution tab is where we would submit events. Okay, so if we go back to our Picasso here, okay, we have our CCP portion where the vendors and freight forwarders would be submitting the events. So in this case, since this is not our responsibility, we don't touch CCP for nothing. Only the vendors and freight forwarders do, and they submit events and add attachments. We just do that in TM on their behalf or for them if they don't do it in CCP. So if they submit some events, we submit others, or if they submit some attachments, we submit others. So basically TM works like a sort of communication between the two systems. These events that we have here, and let me make this a bit larger, are the same events that the vendors and freight forwarders are going to see in CCP. The ones they submit will actually appear here as submitted. If they're planned, they'll be submitted as planned. If they're unplanned or unexpected, the same thing. The Notes tab here will allow us to communicate with them based on specific freight order information. So whatever is related to this freight order, we add here under the tab for Notes. And let's say that's quite easy. We just add a typical note. It's just a exchange of communication between you and the vendor or the freight forwarder. And we also have the Attachments tab, which is basically speaks for itself, where we add attachments. We can either drop files, but it's not working in the training environment. I think in production it is. Or here we just simply go to Insert, first click on Edit, go to Insert, File, and basically the rest is very similar to the process you're used to in attaching any sort of file in any computer. So that's quite easy. You can attach any documents here that will be linked directly to this freight order. So whoever, the vendor or the freight forwarder that is assigned to this freight order will have visibility of these attachments, the same thing as the notes. And you can keep communication through there. Now, if you want to add something specific, a specific message for a specific event, like for example, handover document. Let's say I'm going to submit this document. This is an expected event because it's there already. If it's unexpected, you'll always have to insert the event. Hey, you see the icon is different already. But let's stick to this event, which is a handover document. We see that we have a plan date. You realize that the unexpected doesn't have a plan date. You can either add the date manually here, or when you simply report the event, if I do that, we'll see that now it's a green box and says that the plan date is the same as the actual date, and it all matches, okay? So we have all the information here. Actually, sorry, the actual date and time are going to be the ones of today, okay? Not the same as the plan date. Plan date is December 19th, so this is way early. It will always, if you report an event, it will always submit the info of the day you're submitting it and the time you're submitting it. Okay, this time is out of whack, but in production, it'll be the correct one. If, let's say, I'm doing the next event, loading begin, okay, and none of these events, handover, loading, or loading end, none of these events will have an impact in terms of automatic notifications. A actual event like departure or arrival, these are critical events. And these will automatically launch notifications to the TM Planner so that you know that there has been a departure of your goods and an arrival of your goods. So these are major events. Okay, when they're submitted, you get notifications. For minor events like handover, document, loading, begin, loading, end, you don't get notifications. Okay, for every unexpected event, for example, the top one, if I select here damage, on this date, I'm going to say the same thing. And I'm going to say the location is the source location. So the vendor location, let's say. Right away it says Hyundai Motors, and you see the plan date doesn't show. It's only the actual event date. And I want to add a message to this damage. I want to say here, event reason. Right below it, I select this line, and right below it, you have the damage event. And you can add here, damaged goods at loading point, for example. This message, once I save, once I report, the event, once I report this event, that message will remain here for that specific event, and in CCP they will be able to read this. Yes, Zina.
Very sorry, quick one. Does the vendor deal with this execution, or he only sees the notes? Is the vendor?
He deals with it in CCP, in a different system. Okay, so these. No, this execution part is this is only TM, and TM is only related to us, to TM planners. Okay, TM is the bottom section.
Okay, so we do this as a manual update of where the progress is done.
If the vendor has done it in CCP, you wouldn't even have to do it in TM. When you go to this screen, all these things would be automatically updated.
Okay, by the vendor from CCP.
Exactly.
But if he didn't, we can have to manually update this.
Exactly. If he didn't, whatever we're doing here now and saving will appear in CCP when the vendor logs in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So very, very good question, because that was something that some students were confused about. If the vendors or freight forwarders do things in TM, they don't go into TM, only the planners go into TM. Planners don't go into CCP, only vendors go into CCP. And whatever we do here will be reflected in CCP. So this damage event that I added and this damage message will be visible in CCP. And what I can do is get some credentials for tomorrow for CCP, and we can see this. Okay, we'll look for this freight order, and we can see what the vendor sees. Right, we'll do that tomorrow so we can see how they communicate with each other. Yes, Zina. Zina?
Yes, yes, yes. Oh.
It's not you. It's okay. Honore?
No, no.
Yes, Brian. Just one small question. Is it possible to?
Hey, sorry, Zina. Let's. Yeah. Go on, Honore.
Is it possible to edit or to just recall the event which is already reported? Let us say the vendor or myself, I just said handover is done. Then there will be a handover document in the date of execution. When 10 minutes later, I noticed that this is not going to be done today just because of maybe the staff member who was doing it just for sick. Then it will be done tomorrow, but it was already reported. May I go back and say, no, it is not going to happen today?
Absolutely. So you see, I just did that. I just went to the handover document, and I changed the date. So I can do 3 and then report it, and it stays as 3. Okay, so you can make as many changes as you need to the events, and they'll always be updated.
Thank you.
All right, Honore, thank you. Sorry, Zina, I just, Honore was very quiet, so I gave him the chance to speak first.
No, it's okay. I just thought you were asking me something, so I went back and I realized it wasn't my call.
Okay, perfect. So anyway, good question, Honore. So exactly, you can always update the events even if you have submitted them. Now, there is one thing that if, for example, I insert an event and I say, I don't know, loss, right? And I submit it and I go to report event. What you can't do is delete it. Okay, so this event here, unless they change it in production, I hope they do, that the event stays there. Okay, so eventually the vendor will log in and say, what do you mean loss? So you could always just add here, disregard loss event or any sort of message for now and make sure that we can save this. Right now, you can't delete it. Hopefully, you can in production, and actually, I think you should, because it may be very confusing if you make a mistake. The event stays there. Okay? If you submit it, it stays there. All you can do is change data from it. Okay. The only other thing I wanted to show you before we close the session, because the time is up, is what was it? The submitting of events. So instead of reporting events, basically on past dates, future dates, that's possible, adding the message, reporting them. So basically here we learned how to submit expected events, those with the triangles, and the ones with kind of like the thunder symbol are unexpected. And once something has been saved, you will always get either the green cube here, reported event, or you will get the thunder symbol here for unexpected. And anything you add as an event and anything you add as a message, see, I can even add it here, handover correct. I don't know, I'm just adding any sort of wording here so that you guys can see. See, you can even update the message later on. Damage, loss, they all have their messages here. And tomorrow what we can do in CCP, we'll see how this is viewed in CCP, all right? So we're going to have to call this session a day. I know that even 2 hours seems like little when we're having so much fun, but nonetheless, we'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm going to stop the